ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the CoinGeek Weekly live stream. I am your host, slightly off center. That's camera angle stuff. We are rocking live from sunny South Florida. It is indeed sunny because as the spring becomes summer, it is it's quite warm. So we're having a good time here. Show is also produced by our super secret executive producer, Mr. Secret Producer, which is what we're going to keep calling him until we come up with a better nickname. So everybody, if you're watching live, thank you. And please like, subscribe, hit the alert bell. Let your friends know that we are going to be taking questions live from the troll box. And we are going to be talking to CoinGeek's own Gavin Lucas. So Gavin is a colleague of sorts, but one of the guys who I actually like to work with the most, and we only get to work sort of tangentially to each other in that he does lots of write-ups of my content. So when I do a show, he will write a show summary after it gets published on CoinGeek.com as an article, and then we comment on a lot of the same stuff, and it's been fun talking to him. And it occurred to me, why have we not had Gavin on the show? Because there's a lot of stuff going on in the whole geopolitical scene. We talk a lot about tariffs and imports and taxes and just philosophical policy stuff. And Gavin is somebody who is well outside of the American sphere, but also has his own experience living around the world and doing lots of cool stuff. So it's good to get his feedback and to talk to somebody that isn't just one of us red, white, and blue folks. He's actually Irish, so it's a good time. So again, please tell your friends we're going to have Gavin on, be talking about some interesting stuff live here on the show. And of course, we need to thank our sponsors, the first of which is Rock Wallet. So Rock Wallet is your non-custodial, completely self-sovereign wallet of choice. It is the wallet of choice here at the CoinGeek Weekly live stream. I use it myself. We use it at Gorilla Pool, and we use it for a whole bunch of things. It is a really good self-sovereign, self-custody wallet. Gives you your keys. You can export those keys and move it over to another wallet if necessary. Works really well. It also gives you in-wallet exchanging. So if you need to change your BTC and turn it into BSV, or if you need to take your Bitcoin Cash and switch it over to Ethereum Tether, or if you want, any of the other stable coins and any of the stuff. And then, of course, the new money stable coin included on the Rock Wallet. They do that too. You have to pass just a wee little bit of KYC AML to do it, but once you do that, it works really well. I've been a big fan. I use it myself, and so give it a shot. We also must thank the Otherworldly TCG folks for donating one prize pack per week to the commenter of the day. So if you have the best comment in the troll box, you can win an entire prize pack that allows you to play Otherworldly TCG, the premier TCG game. Is that redundant? Is the G in TCG a game? So it's like saying ATM machine. It makes me want to so one of those things. But yes, please play Otherworldly, and please make a good comment, and you can win the cards from CoinGeek, courtesy of Otherworldly. So thank you, Otherworldly, for being Otherworldly. You guys are awesome. Hey, we get a whole bunch of people here saying hello. Mr. Joey Two Guns, Emilio Morao. We got Cool Cat Cosmos, who is an Anon, so I should assume it's a block streamer. Just kidding. Mr. Brett, Manifestable. Okay, everybody. How we doing? Clear my meridians. Let's cut to a break. We're gonna do the ad thing. We're gonna pay some bills, as it were, and then we'll be back with Gavin Lucas to talk about all the cool stuff going on in the universe. So we will be right back. Hello, sir. Welcome to the show.
How's it going, man?
I'm quite well. How are you?
I'm grand. Thank you for having me on.
For sure. So, Gavin, I know who you are, but I wouldn't say you and I actually know each other particularly well. We have been casual colleagues for a number of years, but I'm looking forward to getting to know you as much as anybody else here. So let's start briefly. Where are you located? And then give me your Bitcoin story. Did you think it was awesome when you first heard of it? Did you think it was crazy? Where are you at today?
All right. So I'm in Northern Ireland, which is the part of Ireland which is still politically the United Kingdom. 6 counties at the top. It's still UK. So when did I first hear about Bitcoin? So I kind of remember this only because I lived in Asia for a long time and I was home when I first heard about it. So it was 2010, toward the end of 2010. And I used to watch, although I'm almost ashamed to admit this, I used to religiously watch Max Kaiser's show on
oh boy. Here we go.
The reason that I know that it was around 2010 or 2011 is one, I was at home and I couldn't get that show abroad and I was in my mom's house. So like back then, he was already hard selling it, right? Like it must have been around 2011, early or late 2010. He was already talking about the digital gold thing. And like, I was interested in it, but Googled it and I was like, oh, how do I get this? I can't just buy it.
Yeah, it was too weird. Yeah.
No, like it just sounds dodgy as hell, right? And like this guy on Russia Today, if it had been a case of like, you know, can I just buy it with a debit card? I probably would have bought like a £10 worth, right? But sure. It was too hard. So anyway, ended up back out in Asia again. And the next time I heard about it was about 2014. When did Ross Ulbricht get convicted and sent to prison? 2014?
Convicted? Maybe 2015, but yeah, Silk Road got nailed in 14 for sure. That was the big news.
Around about then. And the reason that I remember is because I was just starting to do some freelance writing work. And a guy commissioned me to do a 4-piece series on that whole court case and saga and how the backstory. And one of the pieces went viral on StumbleUpon for this new website, and he was pretty thrilled about that. But then, that just double put it in my head that it's a dodgy, right? Because I already had that perception from Max Kaiser, and then that happened, and I thought, no, I can't. I mean, I don't want to be involved in this. Then I started talking to some guys who worked in the oil and gas with me, who did affiliate work and online stuff, and they were like, no, it's a cash system. It's like you can use it to pay people and get paid, and it doesn't have to be used for that kind of stuff. You can send money, for example. I think some of them were poker players, and they were telling me about using it to play poker. So I got into it that way and got interested. And of course, like so many people bought my first coin in 2017, and toward the end of that run. And then, well, I'm just the kind of person that like I can't just do that. Like I'm like, what is this? And like, how does this work? Why does it? And then the whole Satoshi mystery, and like it pulls you in quickly. And that whole story is like. It's like
it's a rabbit hole.
For someone curious, that's just like a magnet, you know, like what happened here and the whole fork wars and all that. It got fascinating.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're into trading, you'll get caught up in it.
Yeah, for sure. So that's funny. I think a lot of us that ended up big blockers kind of have that same, very similar story. Like heard about it early. And kind of had the early cultural influence of what is Bitcoin before it was this, but before it is what it is now, right? Everybody just talking about big money and ETFs and whatever. And then asking that question, there's always that question like, where did this come from? What's the history here? And I think that's the other thing is small blockers have a tendency to be hyper focused on like this narrow view of macroeconomic theory. And big blockers tend to either be entrepreneurial, or they have like this deep like distrust of the official narrative and like I think there's something else going on that I need to keep digging into. So
even being curious, I mean, like if you're at all interested in like what it is, well, you kind of need to know a little bit about who invented it, and then you need to read what he said about it, and then if you're lucky enough, I guess, to have some economic knowledge, some interest in technology, computer science. Like I'm not an expert in any of those subjects, right? But I have a little bit of all of it, and you put it all together, and you kind of get a picture of what it is. Maybe a little bit easier than like someone who's not or doesn't have one of those things or two of those things. And once you kind of go down the rabbit hole of that, then how can you believe the small block? Now,
Right.
like it's
Yeah.
ridiculous. It's
Yeah.
point blank ridiculous. And we're finally reaching the point where it's coming, I feel, to a head, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't mean to say that like BTC is going to blow up and go away, because I don't believe that. But
Yeah.
it's reaching a point where like this halving hasn't delivered the price increases that are required to keep the miners happy. The
Yeah.
Lightning Network hasn't really played out the way like its biggest promoters had hoped and all that. And as Bitcoin, we'll call it that, moves toward TradFi moves toward Bitcoin and brings with it all the
Yeah.
laws and regulations, which we've been talking about since like what 2020. I'm for
At
myself, and
least. Yeah.
you before long before that, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of like they didn't. I don't. If they didn't see it or they just didn't care. Like if you move into that world and expect their money, they're coming with conditions, and one
For
of
sure.
those conditions is KYC, AML. I can't touch this unless I can comply with banking regulations and all. So I don't know how. Some of them are just mercenary, right? And that
Mm.
it's understandable. They just want the money, but
Yeah.
guys like maybe the BCH side, how did they think that was going to go? Like that you could weigh these two things where you get money in, but you also live this anarchist kind of cypherpunk vibe. Like they're just
Right.
not compatible. One or
Yep.
the other had to happen.
Yep.
And when you take the money from the big guys, then they start calling shots. And
Yeah.
finally, we're reaching this point where, like, I think BTC guys and small blockers are going to have to start to reckon with like KYC, AML. This is part of it, and
Yeah.
what does that mean for the Lightning Network and this whole narrative? And they
Yeah.
can't avoid it much longer. It's going to come
No,
to.
it's indeed. Well, and that really is the bigger problem, is that it's such conflicting worldviews on things.
A really thing.
And this is why I use the term Hegelian a lot. Like Hegel is famous for his basically his treatise about society is its thesis, antithesis, synthesis. So you get like hard big idea over here, hard big idea over here, and then ultimately they fight it out, and you get some sort of hybrid amalgam, which we're seeing here in BTC, and that's what it is. It's like, okay, we'll compromise on this thing in order to get ourselves a little further down the road and make some friends, make some money, and it gets to the point where like it's kind of Bitcoin in name only, but it's made so many compromises with such a deeply conflicting system that now you get guy like Max is another, like, I'm a big libertarian, and it's like, yeah, but you're hanging out with a military fascist dictator in Central America full time. And like
That's just disgraceful, man. Is what that
yeah.
is. Like that. Like remember that movie, The Inside Man? With Clive Owen, and he hid in the bank and all
Yep.
that. There's a line in
Yeah.
the movie where he's like, "What's the point of having the money if you can't look at yourself in the mirror every day?" Right? Like, and that's like always stuck with me. It's like, how can a dude like that, who I know was promoting those libertarian ideals way before that, because I watched the show for years, just spell it all out? And like he was like the anti-bank guy, the
Yeah.
anti-BlackRock.
Big time.
The system is going down and all this. That's his whole show, his whole life. And he's like, "Oh yeah, it's okay, Larry Fink, come on in." And yeah, it's how does he maintain his like
No,
his?
it's wild. Well, it's so funny. I used to watch Max like even older. So Max, it's got to be pushing 20 years ago now, because I was a weird gold bug, like right when I got into college, which was a little over 20 years ago now. And he was super into precious metals. He was like an official spokesman for some silver brokerage company, sort of in the same vein that like Peter Schiff is like the gold spokesman. Max really was the silver spokesman circa like early 2000s. And so it's funny to recount the like, the banks are going to collapse. Like the way he talks is also very, he's funny, he's engaging, he's a good entertainer. But, going into like all the same stuff about, okay, society's going to collapse and the dollar's going to collapse. It's all going to zero. Like his whole thing, like tearing up $100 bills and whatever. You need to be in silver. And like, and then it's, he like pivots into this whole thing, and it's like,
He just found something else to shill, man. I think maybe so. Like he probably is to some extent like libertarian and all for real, but
yeah.
Like even just the idea that your show is broadcast on the network of one of the most authoritarian states.
Well, right, yeah, it's like
they will
Russia.
body
Russia's state-sponsored television. Yeah, like we're the good guys.
contradicting, but I guess, like if they're the only ones who are willing to broadcast it, then that's the way it was. There wasn't YouTube back then, so he had to go where he
No,
could get
that's fair.
where he could get reach. But at the same time, it's like, if that's really what you believe in, truly in your heart, like, could you? I wouldn't take money from Putin and his guys for anything. But
so that actually brings up a really interesting point, and this is something you and I have engaged in on Twitter a little bit. Is that kind of, because you're making a good point. Like, if I'm going to talk about the problems of like American or broadly Western, like the kind of EU, UK, the banking apparatus and fiat currency and stuff, and Russia will give you a platform. It's like Russia really kind of is the biggest competitor in the Western Hemisphere on that kind of concept. And it's a little bit like, sort of this antagonism with like Donald Trump right now, which in theory, there are things that I like about Donald Trump on like the pamphlet version of Donald Trump and RFK and all that stuff.
I mean, he is what it is.
But in practice, it's like the tariff stuff, like there's lots of things principally that I dislike. And then the actual practical application of these things, I look at it and I'm like, this is just one more example of this sort of central managed governance stuff hurting the economy, because it doesn't matter who tries to control the economy. The attempt to control the economy is essentially bad for the economy.
And anyone who thinks they can isn't qualified to do it by virtue of the fact that they think that they can.
Precisely.
They immediately are telling you that they don't know enough about it to do it by thinking that they can do it. Right? So you can though make tweaks around the outside. You can create incentives in an economy, and that's about all you can do. The rest is like, this is like trillions of things operating. Vast system of historical forces and like different incentives. Like you as a government, all you can really do is set tax policy and try to make trade deals, and that's about it. Or set the big picture tone, which is what Trump is really good at. Is like, no, we're changing direction. And if you're going to get a country to do a 180 and go the other way, like, you have to be able to sell that narrative, and that's what he is actually really good at. Is sales and marketing, and getting ideas out in a simple way that catch and stick in your head. As a marketer, he's really good at that. For all of his other whatever his flaws may be, that's one thing that he does well, is communicate his ideas.
Yeah, well, and that's the really funny thing. You look at. And that's one thing that, sure, pick a second world country and you bully him a little bit, get some favorable, whatever. But it's like, he's not trying to make a serious trade deal with, pick any random country in South America or Africa or Southeast Asia or something. He's coming up against like China and, having the tariff policy changes every 6 days or something. It's like, all right, it's Thursday. Here's what we're doing, 125%. And then, okay, Tuesday, we're getting rid of the tariffs, like this kind of thing. And it's like, it's such a curious tactic that on the one hand, I find terrifying because it's like, well, I have to live through this. but it's also super juicy.
It's only you could know what he was going to do like an hour before he did it. And right. Options traded, but that's wrong. Anyway, I think what a lot of that is, to be honest, is I believe that he really is just a figurehead to a large extent, and the guy that sets the tone. And then there's factions within his people. Like, it's becoming clear that like this Peter Navarro guy, is that his name? Navarro, and Musk are just not like seeing eye to eye. And like, I even read like Navarro went for a break from the Oval Office, and Besant got Trump to like walk the tariffs back and give a pause. So like, there's clearly conflicting agendas in there, and he's just doing whatever he thinks is best in the moment and reacting to it. And he's good. He's a marketer, but he's not a politician. He's not an economist. Sure. He's listening to people. He's doing what he thinks is good, and then he reacts to like, well, he has his own concerns. He doesn't want to be the guy that owns the Great Depression Part 2, man. Like, that's not
no, for sure.
For him, for his own, his own brand image. So I have a feeling that what you'll see is, we got a deal with Vietnam, we got a deal with Cambodia, we got one with India. That's a big enough country to,
India's
credible, and maybe Brazil or something. And also the tariffs are now at 10% and back to business. Like, to an extent, or if you can get a few big companies to like like he did with Nvidia to announce that's enough to sell as a success, and then before the midterms, you start to get a recovery. Well, that's what he should be shooting for in my head.
For sure.
Because he's going to get wiped out if he doesn't.
Oh, for sure. Well, and that's
people's money. You don't mess with people's money, man.
For sure. Well, and that's the thing that I find so curious about him is that at the very least, I think you can read him as somebody who cares about his own image enough to where even if he has like this animus against, whatever, he wants to be remembered as the guy who made America great again. Like he does not want to be remembered as the bad guy.
No.
And so he's got that little bit of like, all right, I'll relent. And that's really what I think happened with the China deal is I think his guys were finally like, hey, this is not going to work. Like we were with you, but it's clearly not working. And he just backed it off, and he has that like crazy poker face in the sense that he's willing to be like, all right, cool, we got rid of the deal. Like, give me kudos for backing out of my deal from 6 days ago. Like, I fixed America again,
He does that. He does this thing where he creates a problem and then he solves it, and then he tells it that he solved it, right? It's like, he's really good at that, like switching it. But like, so the whole China thing, like, if you had 20 years, you could.
Right.
You could do it, right? You could decouple slowly and like, but like you don't have 20 years in a democratic system where you get the election and then you got the midterms, and especially yours, like you're held to account after 2 years. You don't even really get 4 years.
Well, and this is already his second term, so he doesn't have the like this can play out over 8. Like he's just
his legacy, right? And if he gets Nvidia back and he gets a couple of big deals like that, and he's deciding he's want to put the UAE want to put $1 trillion in, and he gets a bunch of small countries to basically capitulate, then he can sell it as a win. And
for sure,
and if not making any accusations, a few people get to buy assets at half the price they would have otherwise got to buy them at.
Right. He's a genius. Yeah.
But yeah, so, I mean, that's just politics.
No, it is for sure. So let's talk a little bit about. You have this really interesting view about kind of international politics and business, in that you're like the journeyman who kind of covers everything for CoinGeek, and you've been writing for a really long time. So you're a guy that's really got his ear to the ground about not just any one thing, but you really are a very broad generalist, and you have a very good grasp of the general on all kinds of things, which is what I love about your content. What do you?
ADHD is a blessing.
Sure.
So that's the good side of it. Yeah, you pick a bit here, and then you get bored, and you go over here, and you get bored, and you come back later and pick a bit more, and you end up with this whole like. Not saying I'm right, by the way. I just have no opinion, right? But that's the good thing about that. So. Sorry, you were about to ask me something.
I was going to say, like, so what do you think? When you're talking broadly about like the whole blockchain ecosystem and like this need for all of these things in the world economy. I think almost every serious country has some kind of blockchain policy or something. Hey, we're gonna try to adopt it either as a a reserve asset, or maybe we're gonna do some novel thing with the technology or whatever. But is any of this actually working out? Because I don't pay as nearly as much attention as to what's going on with all the other. Do you think anybody out there is actually serious and trying to make some real inroads that maybe we've missed?
Yeah, I do actually. So some of the time I do write kind of news stories for CoinGeek, but I always try to lead into more of a larger point, if you know what I mean, like a larger philosophical point. So the story becomes the lead, and then there's the point after that. So because I do that, I'm aware of what's going on to a large extent. And like literally, you have the European Union creating a digital euro, and it's ready, almost ready, right? So like that's like one of the biggest. That currency now is like 19% of reserves in the world, and like it's used in. I think it's the largest trade bloc in the world whenever you count the EU plus its partners, right? It's like the best trade zone in the world. And like, so that's one. And okay, they're going to, because of the nature of that organization, they're going to try to centralize that and have some control over it. But when you add in all of the other pieces, like the Bank of International Settlements has their cross-border CBDC system,
Yep.
and they backed up from that. I think that might be to do with Russia and Ukraine and all that. And so, but there's this slow awareness if you watch the headlines over time, where like big players at the level are starting to become aware of interoperability problems, right? Like our system isn't going to work with your system, and we can't. And like so like there's only one solution to that, right? Eventually, is one scalable kind of permissionless, if you want to use that word, chain. And I don't know that organizations like that would give up control to that extent where they'd be willing to, like, just say 10 years out from now they decide to mint the digital euro on a scalable utility chain. But they need some level of control to, like, take back tokens out of circulation or freeze funds if it's like turns out the cartel in Mexico is using this currency. They need to be able to stop it. So there's an awareness that interoperability is a problem in these private systems, which was inevitable 5 years ago. You could have predicted that, but I don't know if they're willing to do the full step into, like, we're just going to use a public chain that we can't control at all. So yeah, to answer your question in a nutshell, serious countries are doing serious things with this, but they still, and even international organizations, but they still can't let go of this idea that it has to be their system. And they want to build another one to compete with this one. It's just like the early internet. You know, you had 20 networks, 12 networks, 10 networks, then it narrowed down. And I'm not going to make a prediction, but when you're seeing Bank of International Settlements guys and like ECB guys talking about we've hit a roadblock and we need interoperability, that's a fork in the road. That is getting to those levels, and that's huge. And then, well, maybe you can tell me what's this with BSP and presenting in front of
the World Economic Forum.
No, let me just clarify. I am not a conspiracy theorist type of guy, right? The World Economic Forum exists because people need to talk. Like, people need a place to meet and talk, and I don't really like the way it's not so transparent, right? But like at the same time, like Davos and all, like, you kind of need a place for world leaders to meet and discuss things in person, kind of the way you need us to meet and talk at a blockchain conference in person. Because things get done more when you meet and talk, right? So, like, of course, these forums have to exist, right? But so to me, that the fact that people are starting to talk about the interoperability and the fact that there's this opportunity to present a potential solution is potentially a big deal.
So I'm not sure what I'm allowed to say because I don't remember what's public. Now, I don't know much. I don't know details and who said what, but I do know a couple of people who were there and gave some presentations. And also I think it's interesting because one of the guys who I know went is very much of the opinion of myself, in that, like, God, that's kind of like the lizard hole over there, right? Like, that's like, if you're going to get invited to a party where, like, you know, you got to give a blood sample and they put a mask on you, like, that's where it's going to start, right? But the interesting thing is that over time, and as I've spent more time with people that are like serious movers and shakers in the world, the more I've realized that there are serious factions, even in big organizations. You know, so it's like you take the FBI, for example, or the IRS, right? Like, I look at the IRS as like a monolithic bad, but when you look at, like, the people who, for example, they were weaponized by the Obama administration to remove the tax exempt status of a bunch of, like, right-wing political action groups and things like that. And this was, 10, 15 years ago now. But those things happened. But the reason that they leaked were the people who worked at the IRS who started to leak that information and say, hey, my colleague over here is violating his oath and all this other stuff and doing these things. And that makes its way into even places like the CIA and the NSA or the Pentagon and all these places where I would say, like, these are, as a whole, I think, more bad than good, but there are good people in every place. And so I think, and I'm cavalier about this, so I'm very guilty of treating, like, Blockstream, for example, which I'll just mention, and then very cavalierly just put up memes of lizards wearing suits and the whole thing, and that's me attempting to be humorous, but and also criticizing them for the things that we know that they've done that are bad. But at the same time, I hope, anyways, it's also a challenge to the people that work there and say, you know what, maybe we were the bad guys, or maybe I was bad, and maybe there are places where we could apologize and make amends and that kind of thing. And so all this to say, and I'm not saying this about the World Economic Forum. I'm not about to say, hey guys, WEF good, because I'm still of the opinion that it is also not
subjective in the first place.
Sure.
Depends on what kind of world you want to see. But
yes,
yeah,
but to your point. Yes, it's good to say, if I was invited, Kurt, we'd like you to come meet some people at Davos and explain why one blockchain for the world. It's I would be a fool to say no to that opportunity. As much as I'd be uncomfortable going and then realizing, okay, now there's going to be people who say, oh, okay, they bought Kurt. They've probably got his kids in a cage somewhere or something. But you don't say no to that opportunity to talk to the people that actually make policy for big business and big government and big banks and those things.
If you were invited to meet Larry Fink for 30 minutes and have a coffee and explain your view on Bitcoin,
yes,
why wouldn't you do that? You're going to talk to a guy that can literally get it. If it clicks for him and you've got that shot and you make him click on one thing, doesn't matter who he is or what you're just an influenced and influential person. So you've magnified your influence by doing that, and that's what you have to do to win, right? These people are going to make the decisions whether you like it or not, and so therefore your influence over them is necessary if you want to see the kind of world where BSV is recognized for what it can do. Because Larry Fink, I don't think, or guys like that don't spend time on X for 3-4 hours going down rabbit holes.
No.
So he needs
zero chance.
He needs someone to give him a 15-minute
right.
And you might be lucky enough to get one idea into his head, right? And they and boom. So of course I agree with you. Whether you like an organization or not, you should. If that organization is highly influential, you've got to pitch to them, man. You've got to give them a shot.
Sure.
Do your shot.
So what do you think in your experience? We talked a little bit off air before we started, but what are some things practically? We always talk about blockchain could solve X, Y, and Z for the world, and especially the Bitcoin's going to get rid of the central banks or whatever. And I don't think small blockers have ever explained how that's going to work. But what are some practical things in your experience that you think hey, here's a real problem and there's a real solution? How do we marry those things? So what are some of those things in your mind?
So they range from the small and in my experience in my industry, which I'm a digital marketer as well as a writer, right? So that right up to bigger picture things that I've seen through living in Asia and all that. So I'll go through them. So down on the scale of work related problems, which is where you're going to get commercial use. If you're a digital marketer, data is flowing all the time, right? Analytics tools are logging how many people saw your post, how many people clicked your post, how many people visited your website, how many sales did you make, what commission do we owe you if you're an affiliate, right? So there's all these different counterparties, and they all have to agree on the data set, and there's conflicts, right? For example, so basically, not to get too into the weeds, but digital marketing falls into 3 broad buckets, right? You're using social media, you're using SEO, which is trying to rank organically on the search engines toward the top, or you're using pay-per-click, right? So you're paying Google or Bing or whoever to put you at the top, get some clicks, right? So that's the 3 ways you do it. And then the 3 things that you can make money from are e-commerce, affiliate marketing, which is you're the middle guy promoting comparison table or whatever, or ad revenue, right? That's basically it right now. So, of course, there are problems with data and agreeing on what happened. Okay, if you get a sale for, someone orders a bunch of miners from you or whatever, that's simple enough. There's 2 parties and But if you're using an affiliate dashboard and you want to track your sales and all that, like, not everybody is trustworthy. Some people will shave, if you're an affiliate, will shave your earnings, right? Or if you work in, like, say, for example, you send people through to a trading desk, or like interactive brokers, or if you're in sports betting or whatever, what they'll do is they de-tag your players after a few months, right? Or you sent them through and you're getting a revenue share. They'll like try to cross-sell them to another brand and get them off your books so that they don't have to keep paying you your cut, right? Small things like that, just in my own experience. And so it would be really good if we could have timestamp verifiable records of payments being made by all parties involved, right? So, like, yeah, I sent this player to you, or I sent this customer to you to trade. He made X deposits, and I can see that. And there's no need for me to wait till the end of the month for you to send me that. I can just, as he makes the purchase, I can get my bit, you can get your bit, he can keep his bit, and everyone's, and it's all automated, and no one can dispute what happened. Second of all, that's one on the back side of it, right? The front side is it can make better experiences for customers. So, like, say you're in a trading desk and, like, suddenly you're about to make a trade that goes against the interests of, I don't know, maybe the platform, and the platform says, "Oh no, look, our button broke for you to click buy." That happens in sports betting a lot, by the way, when you go to do early cash out, and they're like, "Oh no, the button broke. Oh, how convenient. We don't have to pay millions out to our players, right?" Oops, right? And I'm not going to name any brands, but some huge brands get away with that, right? In the UK. So, I mean, if you could just take that out of their hands by using a blockchain with some oracles that determine the payout, that in itself is revolutionary for the quality of these products, right?
For sure.
So that's on the business side. Basically, summarize all of that. Just accurate data and automated payouts that take the human corruption out of this, right? Out of all these processes.
Yeah, it's huge. Yeah.
The second thing, talking about corruption, is, and this one's pretty close to my heart, why I really believe in BSV and timestamp on-chain transactions, is I lived in Southeast Asia for 10 years, right? And in Indonesia, and then in the Philippines. And I have literally seen the effects of corruption. And I'm not just talking about, like, the way we have it in the West, where, your politicians beholden to the bank that sponsored him, and he gets a job on the board after he finishes his career in politics, and he makes a law to help them, right? I'm talking about cops that show up and stop your car, and they want you to pay them, or they'll seize your vehicle and, like, take you and throw you in prison, or, like, they just steal all the tax money and live in mansions. While I went into it's called Kampung in Indonesia. It's like a place. It's like a slum, right, where a bunch of people live. And I was teaching English to them, and there's a little kid in there who was covered from head to toe in boils with, like, pus in them and all through her hair and her face and all that, right? Mom was like, "No, I don't have the $5 to buy the ointment that I need," right? And her husband's working, driving a jeepney all day, trying to take customers around, doesn't have the $5 to get his kid the relief rate. So this is in a country that probably has more oil and gas and gold than, like I don't know, probably like as much as Russia has, on if you scaled it down to their country's size, right? A very wealthy country. But, like, people are running around, like, living in conditions like that because all the tax money that gets paid to help those people just gets taken for the second holiday home in freaking Singapore. It's terrible. And so, like it's easy to, like, be like, "Oh, that's over there. It doesn't matter to me," but, like, it does matter, because one, that's human lives that are, like, they're dying because of corruption, and two, it can be stopped. If you, like, imagine that I'm not saying that I necessarily agree with CBDCs. It should be done on a decentralized ledger. But mention that I can prove that I had to pay that cop, right? Like, he stopped my car and I paid him $100. No, I didn't. No, but it's cash. I can't prove it. But if it's on the blockchain, timestamp, I can say it was at this time, I remember I was there, and then that guy's screwed. He loses his job, right? Like, so,
Right.
like, it creates incentives to stop this. And then, say the tax revenue service in that country had a wallet, and suddenly $1 million moves out of the wallet. Well, a journalist can make a phone call and say, "Where the hell? What was that for?" And they don't necessarily have to tell you if it was to fund the military or whatever. But like, if they can spot suspicious activity, like this wallet keeps moving, 10 grand a week out into these other wallets, and it can be audited by anyone. And just the fact that other people can see it and make phone calls and inquiries will put off a lot of that from happening, right?
Oh,
And then
just opportunity for real investigative journalism, which would be
yeah,
great.
yeah. Which, so basically, if this happened at scale, it could dramatically reduce corruption, which would literally save people's lives, first of all, and second of all, would, from our point of view here in the West, like, you want Indonesia and the Philippines and all to be richer, because if they're richer and their people are better off, they can buy more stuff from us. They can buy, from a Europe perspective in the States, they can buy more Apple computers and Ford cars, and it's hard for them to do that if they're stuck in this situation, because all the money that's meant to go to their healthcare and education to help them get up just gets taken. And like, so imagine all those people who are empowered, and that's just a better world, right? So those are two right away: my industry experience in digital marketing, and also that life experience of seeing the naked corruption and how evil it is, and how there is a tool to stop it, and it needs to be used to stop it, or it's never going to get better. Unless they're lucky and get a good leader.
Which is pretty iffy.
So those are two things, and then just the conversation about global trade and all this. I mean, blockchain can just make it all so much smoother and transparent on every scale. From, like, I think I was telling you off air, in Northern Ireland, we now have these trade barriers with England, because I'll not get into too much about it, but in Brexit, we left the European Union, and that created confusion. Like, are we part of the UK or the EU? But we have an open land border with the EU, and goods can't move freely anymore. And it created a whole rigmarole, right? So, like, if you could see the bigger picture of where a good came from, its point of origin, and how many times it changed hands, and where it entered from, and that would just solve all that. Like, it would all just go away, right? Like, and you would say, this batch, we can't take it because it doesn't belong on our market, and out you go, right? Instead of having hundreds of customs agents and 50 forms to fill in for every small business that then puts the costs up for everybody, you could just say, oh, we scanned the barcode, and we can see that where this came from and where it's intended for. Going through search, and all that creates prosperity, more profits for the businesses doing trade, less bureaucracy, less friction. So that's the bigger picture. And I don't think that a lot of people who are just interested in crypto see that. Like, this is seriously world-changing tech, man. Like, at the big picture scale, we need to realize that vision.
Well, what do you think? I mean, other than the obvious stuff, in that, like, well, yeah, but I just like trading on Phantom or whatever, and that's really what I want it for, and whatever. I think that's probably been the biggest impedance to making this happen. Is opportunity cost, right? And I look at every dollar that I've spent trying to do something cool in blockchain, and then I have to calculate that against, like, yeah, but what if I just bought BTC or just bought Sol or just bought whatever instead of investing in my business or whatever else, right?
Last year, man. Well,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but I don't know. I mean, what's behind that? Is that it's partly that. It's partly the financialization of Western economies. We're not. America's very different, obviously, from the UK, so I'm not going to generalize. But, like, the UK basically made the whole center of its world the financial services industry in the 80s and 90s, and that doesn't require a lot of manpower. It's not a big industrial, power plant or whatever, but it's a money printing machine. And, like, when you see a lot of people get rich doing this, and you're struggling because you can't really find a good paying job, to copy. And then it's all, it's in the culture, man. It's just a cultural thing of making money with zero effort, and like clicking buttons, and like there's nothing wrong with that if you want to do that and you're skilled at doing that, but you build value too. Like, you can actually do that in a way that is valuable, like build a comparison engine for products that you know really, really well and help people make a decision on accurate information. And you will make automated money, but like you got to put that effort in first to build something, a useful tool for people. So you can do both, but I think it's just that people see other people do it, and they saw people get rich and they want to do it too, because like who wouldn't want to do something that has a huge payoff with a really low effort? Like, it's human nature. And sadly, the education of how this all works isn't there, and that for everyone that cashed out a mill, someone put that million in, right? Like, and didn't make that money. And it's like a zero-sum game, and that's how, at least here in the UK, our economy is becoming like that. And hopefully they swing it around and change it and get back to some sort of manufacturing and industrial. It'll never go back to being the biggest car exporter, because you can't compete with China. You just can't. If you're looking at decent wage, you just can't. But we should do more high tech manufacturing and real value.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah. Well, and I think that also it also has this tendency to change the way that a nation becomes a cultural exporter. I think back 50, 60 years, and the UK was a huge exporter of culture. Like, you think about the music and the actors and like these kind of things, where like, when you thought of rock and roll, you thought of like the Beatles and the Who and Led Zeppelin and these kind of things. And today it's like
the 60s and the 70s was like that.
Yeah. Well, and then the US too, that like the US had that same kind of cultural renaissance, but as we've turned more into a like Wall Street, instead of the American working man or whatever, like our cultural exports have become a lot less interesting too, to the point where even our movies, like our biggest cultural export in the US has always been Hollywood. It's been movies more than music. But for the last 10 or 15 years, it's been the same kind of thing. It's like, I don't know, should we remake The Lion King again or whatever? And like it never, there's not a big banger. There's certainly not groups of big movies that are like culturally defining or anything anymore.
I think there's a few reasons for that. Like part of it is the internet, right?
Sure.
And so like before, in those decades you mentioned, even the 90s had a very distinct, like looking back now, a very distinct like image and a type of music and stuff, right?
For sure.
But the internet, like, just everything got blended up into a big giant soup of crap and mixed around, and like like all that. It's to some extent those forces that created very unique national music and movies and all that are just blended into something. I think the other thing is the economic models. Like, for example, someone put it to me that movie producers, who comes up with the money? The producers, right? So the producers won't back risky ideas anymore, because they can't make, if a movie bombed before, they could make it back on DVD rentals and sales.
Yeah.
Whereas now they have no safety net, right? Like, if it bombs, it's dead, and they can make pennies on streaming, and you lost tens of millions of dollars, right? So it's cultural, with everything being diluted so much, and then other forces like political correctness and all that. And then it's the actual economic fear of just like losing 20 million bucks on a movie that doesn't do well. Like, and it's kind of like VC startup culture. Like, you need to have the 10 losers to get the one that goes boom, right? And like, no one's willing to take those risks anymore on movies and music. It's just manufactured. We know this works. We know another Marvel movie will bring in twice the money we spent. We know another. And there's no more Fight Clubs and no more Matrixes and American Beauties and all these classic movies that just came out from maybe weren't expected to do so well and became something big.
That's interesting.
that's part of it. And maybe NFTs can return the value of digital products being scarce again. Like
Sure.
maybe you can get back to not that rental model where like you can make your movie back on the rentals, but like instead of having Netflix and Amazon and all that, like what if you had to just rent the movie like you used to?
Right.
Get an NFT that gives you like 3 days to watch it and then it expires.
Direct distribution. Yeah.
Yeah, or even being able to own that. Like that.
Sure.
That's your copy of this movie with a unique serial number, and that's yours now.
Right.
And if Amazon ever goes out of business, which it won't, but if it does, then you still have that, and you can like plug into another service. It needs to return to that, and maybe NFTs are the answer to that to some extent, like creating a limited number of something or ownership of it. And I don't know, but the effects of streaming have been really, really bad on music and movies and everything else.
It's a bizarre shift. And you mentioned like everything kind of amalgamating into a soup. And like one of the things I've noticed, I used to go on lots of road trips, and it used to be very apparent when you'd be in like, wow, I'm in Iowa, or wow, I'm in Arizona, wow, I'm in Tennessee. And now it's like very kind of doesn't matter where you go. Like everybody's accents have kind of softened, and it's like, okay, there's a McDonald's and a whatever here, and like there's
do you think it's the internet?
Probably. I feel like it has to be, in that, people don't learn to talk from their parents anymore. They learn to talk from the same prepackaged nonsense TV and internet and whatever.
My son is 9, and he literally sounds more like you than me.
Weird.
Because
it's crazy.
Right, on YouTube, and he's just hearing this from Ryan's World and stuff he used to watch, and then he's watching movies and all that, and his friends kind of talk like that to some extent, and it has to be. It's just YouTube, and I suppose because his mom isn't from here either. There isn't that two people, with the same accent. But I agree with you. It's terrible, man. Like. And I actually really believe a lot of what you just said there is causing things like Trump and causing things like Brexit and causing all these crazy political things. Like
we need to claw our culture back. Like, hey, man, I liked my grandparents. They had, even at my house. So like my mother-in-law is from Poland. So she has a very Polish accent. She's interacting with my children. And like, you don't get a lot of that anymore. But when I was growing up, Chicago has a huge Polish neighborhood. And even that, like you used to walk into all these stores and I'd speak English. They wouldn't even know how to talk to me because they were Polish. And now today it's,
we got
they're
that.
Like, I don't even speak it anymore. That kind of thing,
I know. And that's interesting. A place like the States where you have these little microcultures all coming together. But like somewhere like the UK, like, okay, so obviously like Trump is to some extent a result of mass immigration, right? And too fast, and people going like, whoa, this is all changing too quickly for me. And it's not only immigration; it's also the speed with which tech is changing. The next level, like my mom doesn't even know how to use internet banking, and we have AI that like can talk to me like a person, right? It's like it's too fast for people, especially older people, right? And we're going to get there someday too. And a lot of it is just a backlash. Like, stop, hit pause. Let's go back to the way it used to be. And like, that's what, to some extent anyway, Trump is. That's what Brexit is. That's what all these movements are. It's like, we need to stop everything, hit pause, freeze, and like integrate people and get everyone on the same. And I think that's just not going to happen though. And I worry about, because the things are just going to keep speeding up, man. Like it's going to get freaking faster. Like I really believe AI will be the kind of changes we saw since 2000 until now will happen between now and 2030. Like that level of change and the speed with which that's going to happen is going to complete. Like who the hell knows what's going to happen 2030s. Right. Again, to circle it right back to blockchain, there is a tool to mitigate the worst effects of this.
Yeah,
it can't undo it, it can't stop it, but it can definitely make it transparent and accountable and like bring some sense of control, which is what I believe people really want. It's like we don't feel that we can control anything in our own country anymore. So like can we have some sort of system that like at least gets a data set that everyone, you've said this many, many times about data sets that everyone can agree on. Like can we actually have the facts about how many people came in the country, what kind of visas they were on, have they left,
Yeah.
have those visas been rescinded and burned? All of this can be,
Right.
and can I even trust the official people who are supposed to be telling me the truth is? Like,
Yeah.
get it all on the
Right.
blockchain now, like the metadata on the like
Imagine
timestamps, so
that.
that like, no one can argue anymore about what the hell is going on. Like,
It's funny. I read a crazy article about a week ago, and it explained that there's so much bad information and lack of reporting in census data that it's possible that there are up to 2 billion more people on Earth than have previously been estimated.
I could believe it. Like, it's pretty bad here, but when you go to like places like Indonesia and Thailand, the Philippines, and all that, like, dude,
Yeah.
like you can. I was literally, and I'll not name a date or a time, right? But like, I came back in Indonesia temporarily once on a tourist visa, and it was like between jobs, right? So I had this teaching job, and we were waiting for the visa. And literally gave a dude in the airport a brown envelope, and he walked me around the freaking aisle, through a back door, had a cup of tea with me. We chatted a little bit of Indonesian. I gave him the envelope, and he walked me into the country. No stamp. Right, so like, there's an example, right? And that was my employer, and so that's how business is done there. I'm not going to judge, right? But like, so if that happens a million times over millions of different transactions, you could have 2 billion more people, or like you could have like in countries like China where it isn't exactly transparent, you could have like 200 million less people than you think, and you know. We're going to find out, man, because reality there with that situation is about to.
Yeah.
We're going to find out who's bluffing, you know, and who really has what cards, and that's an interesting.
Speaking of bluffing, let's talk a little bit about BRICS. I've been for a long time. People are, oh my God, BRICS. It's going to be Russia and all like Russia, China, Brazil, and these other players. And I've always said, okay, here's the amount of threat as a percentage that BRICS is, and it's how much of your net worth would you be willing to save in a Russian bank, and whatever that percentage is, that's how much of a threat BRICS is. And so, but you've had some interesting takes about BRICS, both from a technology standpoint and geopolitics. I'd love to hear your take.
So you said how much of a threat does BRICS represent, right? So what I would ask you is, what do you mean by a threat?
Well, as an American, I get to be both a massive critic of American politics and money, but at the same time benefiting from it massively. So I guess that, like, American homogeny over like the petrodollar and global trade and that kind of thing.
So I 100% agree with your first point, is that the transparency of, or the lack of transparency of BRICS countries generally, right? Not like there's exceptions. Like, I think Brazil and India might be less OPEC than China and Russia and Iran, right? So I would save 0% of my money in Russia, but I might save some money in China if I had an opportunity, and I could be guaranteed that, like, big guys went into China and invested billions, Apple and stuff. So there must be some safeguards. But yeah, that's why I ultimately don't believe that China will be the hegemon to replace the United States, because they will never open up their economy the way that the US. Like, I can literally put money in the US and take it back out in the same day. Like, if I could move money into your banking system, get it back out, I could buy a treasury, sell it later that week, and I'm not even from America, right? It's literally what Karl Popper called an open society. You can say what you want, you can broadcast information, you can move money in and out, and that creates trust, right? Because like, we're not holding your money here, you can take it out if you want, so you have to give them a reason to keep it there. But China is not an open society, and it never will be as long as the CCP or the CPC is in power, because they don't want to lose the power. But second of all, they like control of their currency, right? So they like to be able to devalue it or whatever they want to do with it to make their exports more competitive and all the rest. And if you really wanted to replace the United States and the United States dollar, you wouldn't be able to do it in that way. You would have to say, okay, our bonds are for sale on the open market. the way treasuries are, you would have to say the yuan or the renminbi is tradable on forex markets freely and openly. That party will never allow that to happen, right? Because that's the end of that. Like, that would ultimately probably bring them down. They lose control of that. They lose control of everything, right? So from that perspective, I don't think that they will, but I don't think that's their aim. I think their aim is to, I'm looking at a world map here, and their aim is to create like a side, like China, India, Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
Australia's culturally Western, but they're kind of making a decision right now about like what we do here. Like, this is bad, right?
Yeah.
So, and Africa, and then you have Africa, right? Which it's too late. Basically, China already won that.
They've been colonizing it for a generation now,
and in a different way as well. Like let me build you ports and schools way, But ultimately, it's for quid pro quo, right? That's the history of how China has always operated. It's like, we want tribute. We don't want. We don't really care if you speak Chinese and promote communist ideals. We don't care. We just want the gold or the oil, and we want you to follow our economic development model. So
hey, we're not going to cut your feet off like the Belgians did,
No, we're not going to do that. We're not going to drone strike your school either, but we're going to make sure that we get the oil. And if you don't, we're going to call in the loans on the port, and everything's going to stop. Right?
Exactly,
It's like a different form of doing things, but it's still ultimately the same agenda, which I think they just want China to exist in a world that they are not dependent on or beholden to America, right? And like,
for sure,
that's it.
That's not an unreasonable desire. Yeah.
The history of their country is basically the Qing dynasty was the peak, and then the British arrived and said, "We would love to come in and trade with you." And the guy said, "No, you have nothing we want. We don't want your watches, and we don't want your cannons." And they said, "Well, it's not really an option. We're asking, but the king, whatever, won't be very happy if you don't." And they came back and they had a big fight, and they ultimately won to Hong Kong and flooded the country with opium. That's the short version of that history, right? So the Chinese call it the century of humiliation, and they're pretty determined that's never going to happen again. Because and they want to just have this area, I think, where they are like, okay, we're sure the oil is going to keep flowing to us, and we're sure that these guys aren't going to be able to come in again and do this again and stay away from us. And that's where I think it's going to go, is that it's going to split into two, like Cold War Part 2, like two spheres.
Sure.
And they have their part, and the US has your part, but like, no one realistically can replace the USD, even if they wanted to at the moment, because just think of all the debt that's denominated in US dollars.
Well,
your own debt's what, 36 trillion, right? And that's mostly to Americans, but that's not the point. The point is, other countries also have debt denominated in USD, like to the World Bank, the IMF, to each other, to corporations, owe USD. Like, you cannot take this currency and just suddenly switch to something else. It's like the whole house of cards would come down. Like we'd be back in the freaking 1800s overnight. So if it happens, it will happen like gradually at like 1% reduction a year for like 50, 60 years.
Generation, right?
Even then, there's no alternative to it. There just isn't. There just isn't another. But like, what's going to take its place? The euro, maybe.
Well,
like, I don't think
probably not. Yeah,
no, I don't think so.
And that's the interesting thing. And I always say this to the people that are like, "Oh, the dollar is going to collapse any day now." Like 10 years ago, I would have agreed. I was in that camp. But as I've grown to understand Keynesianism and this concept of like modern monetary economics, is that if you can die slower than everybody else, the Keynesian system benefits your sphere in an incredible capacity. And so, like, yes, the US debt is a big problem, and we're experiencing all kinds of fallout from that. But the rest of the world is going to hurt more, and relative to the rest of the world, the US is going to continue to pull ahead until that balance is created, or there's some other massive economic breakthrough. And
or so they come to another agreement whereby, like Bretton Woods Part 2, where everyone gets together, says, right,
they reestimate everything.
All this debt is now valued in Bancor. I think that was Keynes's idea, is to create like a neutral like
Dogecoin
reserve currency. But I mean, gold maybe, but I don't even really buy that theory, to be honest. I don't really understand why the fascination with gold. I mean, prosperity across the world has gone up dramatically since we came off the gold standard, because US dollars are not just backed by the US military, they're backed by all of the productivity of every country and every corporation and person who uses them and is willing to accept them. So like that's ultimately always going to be more than the value of gold, which you can just find in the ground. You know, it's rare, but like human productivity is freaking. There should be some limit, though, definitely, on how much they can print. Like there should.
Yes.
We just got 30% inflation in 3 years or something here because of COVID, and they did the whole thing that you guys did over there, where they print like trillions and put it out, and like it's terrible. So like ultimately, all that to say, there's no alternative for the foreseeable future. There's no country that's as open anyway and would let you come in and out of its financial system that way.
Right.
And China, I don't even really believe wants to be the hegemon. I think they just want BRICS countries to be there.
Right.
And India isn't play that game. So even within that, like India and China don't. That's not going to be a friendship.
Oh, I know. Exactly. Well, that's the thing. I think. Well, and that's what I find so funny is that people will criticize Americans for like, oh, your border policies are racist and all these and I'm like, guys, like I agree they're imperfect and that there's lots of problematic things about American culture and politics and race relations and whatever. But if we're talking about compared to, there's about 6 billion people on Earth that are way worse than the U.S. when it comes to like racial politics and borders and all of that stuff.
Yeah, I know. And they have like conflicts that go back 500 years over there. Oh, by the way, did I mention I live in Northern Ireland? Yeah, I know.
Right.
Until like 30 years ago, as I told you before, once like there were car bombs going off and like weekly in the city and people being murdered and stuff over like where's the border? Like it's crazy.
Yeah.
But thankfully that all died off when Britain joined the EU, and then it doesn't really matter anymore because it's you have Ireland, the island, you have England beside it, and Scotland and Wales. You have Northern Ireland, it's a little part of the UK, but like when you're all in the same trading area, it doesn't matter. Everything's open. You can move freely. Goods and people can move around. But whenever one decides to leave and take this little piece with it, it's like all of a sudden you have these problems again. Where's the border? Can goods move freely? Can I go freely across? And it's, can we just create
drama?
World global free trade zone, like where there's no freaking, but then the free movement of people isn't going to fly in a lot of places. Like if you just let everyone move anywhere, it won't work. Especially in Europe, where Western European countries have these big welfare states, and
that's the problem.
It attracts people who
you have to fix.
Are scared that they might not be able to make enough to survive, and they come. Like I did it. I came back from Asia when I had a kid because, in large part, like I lost my job at the time in oil and gas, and I was like, okay, at least there I have health service, like universal health care, and the kids will get educated. So I understand why people do it, but like the system won't work if everybody's taking out more than. And so if you just let it be a free, open thing, then the system wouldn't exist anymore. It couldn't. So you have to filter for people who are going to contribute. And as a whole, immigrants in the UK do contribute more than they take.
For sure.
As a whole.
Well, the same thing with Americans, and even American immigrants. But it's funny because you see, people like, they're mooches on the system. And I'm like, a lot of them are working real hard and putting more into the system than they're taking out. And like, let's
they're stealing our jobs. Like, why? Did you apply for that job? Pretty sure you didn't, man. I understand the frustration to an extent with some people because, if I'm lucky that I've had enough success to be comfortable, and came from a father who also had that and built a good life for himself and his family, right? But if you say that you were like a day laborer, right, and you're just like taking it every day at a time, and like you're in and out of work, and sometimes you have work and sometimes you don't,
and now you're competing with an illegal immigrant or something.
Exactly, you're trying to get a house, and like a social house, or like, and this is carnage for their lives, right? And but it isn't also the fault of the guy who's like really qualified to come here, and he comes here and he's like, like just. He deserves to be here because of America.
He's like, just he's another person with the exact same problems. So
also, this is another thing that's lost in the narrative, and the data would be good to have. It's like UK, the vast majority of immigrants in this country every year are either on a work visa or a student visa, which means they're paying huge sums to study here, or they are working here because they passed the points-based system to say that they're qualified, right? So this idea that they're just here to mooch is not true, right? And there are some groups within, if you look at the data set, that don't do as well as others, shall we say, right? And they don't contribute as much. But that's just, cultural and all that, and they should be limited. But again, to bring it back to the point of this podcast, it would just really be good to be able to point to something and say that narrative isn't true that you're promoting. Like, we have data here that proves, like, out of 700,000 people, 400,000 were students, 250,000 workers, and only 30,000 are refugees that you claim are flooding the country. And this is verifiable fact, because everything is.
Well, there's 800. There's 800 violent criminals who are deporting immediately, right?
And we can prove it, because we can also prove that the token on the blockchain that represents their identity was burned, so they're no longer here and they're no longer entitled to any benefits. That's what I'm talking about. That would solve a lot of problems, to be like, we can prove they're gone because here was their identity card on the blockchain and now it's gone, and so they can't. They couldn't be here because they couldn't possibly do anything, right? All of this can be done with a scalable blockchain that charges,
imagine that,
1/10,000th of a penny to do these transactions, and all of it can be done in such a way that the government doesn't fully control it either, and that's a good thing. And we need to keep hammering that. I really hope BSV gets a breakthrough soon, man. Like, it's some kind of. We need a morale win. Like, I know there's 1,000 little things going on, but I would love us to just get a big, a win that's.
Well, just a serious proof of concept. Like, we have so many proof of concepts that don't mean anything, but any one of these things, and even a pilot program, like I think actually the best example is probably the Mint Blue thing in Belgium right now with their instant taxation situation, where like it makes a few jumps through the Belgian revenue office, and like it pays the tax office, it pays the people who are processing. Like, it's breaking all this stuff out. Really, really. Like, if you could scale that out, like, how much waste could you eliminate there? Well, you can calculate that, right? And so that would be.
That's incredible. A relatively small country, which, relatively small. So it could be done with the transaction capacity that Terranode will bring easily.
Yeah, for sure.
Easily. But yeah, I still believe like that it's better to integrate into the existing systems than to try to build competitors on BSV. Like, if you could get Google to use it or Facebook to use it, rather than try to build an alternative to Google or Facebook, you're just going to get so much further, so much faster. Or if you can get VeriSign to use it instead of building a competitor, we just need one.
Right.
And then the marketing starts where you can walk into a boardroom and say, "Oh yeah, we have VeriSign." Right. And they say, "Oh, okay, that's good enough." So it's like social proof, it's getting that first one that's pretty hard.
Yeah. Well, Gavin, we are 15 minutes over because this conversation has been awesome and I'm having a great time. But
we should do it again sometime.
We should. This should be a quarterly thing or something, like catch up with the whole economy. Yeah.
CoinGeek keeps me abreast of what's happening, and having that writing gig kind of forces me to be aware of it, and I love that because it builds into so many other areas. Like, if you have the big picture, can write other things. You learn about tech trends before people, and like
Yeah,
all
that's great.
the BRICS thing and all that we were talking about, like trading opportunities there. It's huge. And if you have your ear to all of it, then you can see these things. By the way, just in case I come across a certain way on social media, I just want to be clear to everyone. Like, I try to be like neutral, but I'm not pro-China because I've been accused of that a few times. And I'm not anti-American. I'm just anti the version of this that turns away from global trade. And like, I just want like everyone, like they can get rich and you can get rich too, and like everyone can trade. Like, and I'm not going to take a side in this, but I'm not like, I think Pax Americana in the last 50 odd years has been the best part of human history, man. So like, let's do that, more of that, even if it's a joint thing where China has to be respected and given its sphere. Keep trading, keep open trading. Don't turn back. Don't put up the barriers. Just keep trading, make everyone richer, and like let them win what they can win, and you win what you can win, and like hopefully this whole era will just stop and we'll go back to that and then we renewed, invigorated fashion, man. And hopefully blockchain can play a part in that.
Honestly, that's like a beautiful vision. We should turn that into one of the short clips for this show, because I get the same thing. I get my critics, my like left-wing critics. Kurt's a hard right-winger. My right-wing critic, Kurt's some kind of a weirdo globalist. I'm just like,
if you're tweeting, it's hard, man. You can just say, "Oh, look, China's GDP grew this year," and someone will be like, "Pro CCP shill," and you're like, "What? It is a fact, a neutral fact, like
data point." Yeah.
I don't know, but that's part of digital communication. But yeah,
for sure.
So, yeah, man. Thanks for having me, and I hope everyone enjoyed the conversation as much as I did.
For sure. No, it's been a pleasure. And really, let's make this a regular thing. And
we'll sure, talk man. Soon. I'd love to. Cheers, man. Thanks. Have a good evening.
Take care. Bye-bye. All right, everybody. That was Gavin Lucas. Probably the most prolific writer over here with CoinGeek. And so we're going to need Becky to watch this whole show and do the summary, because I think it'd be unfair of Gavin to have to watch himself and then summarize. So Becky, you better prepare. This one's for you. Okay, let's wrap. I'm not going to go wax philosophical any more than I need to. Let's roll the comment of the day graphic, and then we'll distribute prizes forthwithly. Go. Hey, Joey Two Guns. You're the man. So we're keeping everything in Florida. Joey's another Floridian. So congratulations, Joey. Please reach out to the Real CoinGeek account on X, and we will distribute your Otherworldly cards, courtesy of Otherworldly TCG. Thank you to Rock Wallet, our sponsors, everybody else. And if you would like to be on a show here, if you have something interesting to talk about, some amazing business opportunity, some app you've developed, or some crazy thing you're up to, please reach out to the Real CoinGeek account on X to get on the show. We give preferential treatment to people with big ideas or big businesses that are coming out soon. Everybody, thank you so much for spending your hour and nearly 20 minutes with me today. And remind your friends to like, subscribe, hit the alert bell, because every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, this guy is live on the air, and I need you paying attention here. So please share across the socials and all that stuff. Last but not least, certainly not least, be good to each other. And then we don't have to keep having all these conversations about how to kill and deport and send these undesirables away and everything else. If we're good to each other, we can just do business, and wouldn't that be a whole lot better than bickering about everything? That's how I feel. All right, it seems like we've even run out of the music because everyone's fallen asleep at the wheel, including myself. All right, everybody, love you. See you next week. Take care.